In the Superliminal tutorial I did over on the CG Matter channel, I showed you how to make objects from small to big or big to small, but one detail I didn't talk about too much is the glowing outline that shows up whenever I pick or right before I drop off a object. I want to go into a bit more detail about how to do this kind of glowing ring effect because I feel like it could be useful for a whole bunch of effects. So here I've set up a scene pretty similar to what you just saw. In fact, this is the same one as the baseball where we have a sphere on the ground. Again, we have a camera that is, it has been tracked, so that's why it's moving. It's going to be on the ground, and then it gets picked up just like the original shots. I didn't get to do the drop-off thing because I guess I'm lazy, but in general, kind of same setup. One thing to notice is not only do we have our sphere kind of like animated correctly, and also another thing that I've set up is the render settings, like in terms of this being a shadow catcher and all that kind of stuff, in the render tab, film being set to transparent, all that has been done, which means that when we hit render, we are already, once it, does the render, we're already going to have a sphere with the correct lighting, etc. Okay, so that is where we're going to start off. I'm assuming you're going to start off from the same place. So here we have a render. We're in the compositing nodes. You can see our render layers going to composite and viewer. And the question is, how do we make the glowing ring? Now, one thing you might think is we need the alpha of the sphere that we're then going to dilate in, etc. But the issue is, if we look at the alpha, it includes not only the shadow, but also some of the noise that's in the shadow catcher, etc. So somehow we need, first of all, a way to isolate the sphere, and a nice way to do that I think I mentioned in the tutorial is Cryptomatte. Go to the output properties, or not output, go to view layer, and then go down to Cryptomatte and enable object. In other words, now when we use Cryptomatte, we can isolate by object, which is perfect because the sphere itself is an object. So add in your Cryptomatte node. Again, this is a good way to just isolate objects. You are first going to need to connect image to image, and then Cryptomatte 0 to 0, 0, 1 to 1, etc. It looks confusing, but really it isn't. And one thing you're going to notice is that when we look at it, you're not going to see anything, so just make sure to re-render after enabling Cryptomatte. So now you can see that Cryptomatte lets us pick whichever objects we want. I'm going to click add and choose the sphere. So now we have the sphere isolated in terms of the render without the shadow, and we can also have the matte. And this is kind of like the main key insight for making this effect. So once we have this matte, all we need to do is just a bit of math, and that will give us exactly what we want. So first of all, we have the matte. I'm going to make a second version of it that is dilated. In other words, we are going to make a version that's expanded. So I'm going to set this to feather and expand it by something like 10 to grow it, or even something smaller like 5. So we have the original and then the expanded one. We then use a math node, set it to subtraction, so we can subtract away the large version from the original version, which gives us the ring. Again, the bigger this is going to be, of course, the larger the ring's going to be. Next, what we need to do is add in a glare node so that this white mask ring is actually glowing. So set this to fog glow. We're going to set the threshold to 0 so that anything kind of meets the requirements for glowing. Make that larger, and if you want to make the glare even stronger, you could like tag in a second node right after, okay? So in general, anytime we render a frame now, it's going to have this glowing effect, but let's actually see it in action. So instead of just having this render, let's also import in the background. So I have a image sequence for that. Boom, sequence. We're going to layer these together. I guess probably best way to do that is with an alpha over node. So we want the image sequence in the background. So if we view this right now, you can see basically we have a sphere on the background, and then finally we want to include our new effect, and the way you overlay stuff like that, mix node, put in the glare, and since this is kind of like an additive light effect, make sure you set the mixing mode to add. So now you can see we have kind of like this ring with glow, and maybe we should make that glow even stronger. A good way to do that is this factor. You can make it like a number larger than 1, and it kind of punches it up. Or again, you could even throw in another glare node and then brighten it. Of course, it's probably helpful if your original footage wasn't that bright to begin with, but you can see that now we have a procedural effect for making this kind of glowing thing. So we could have a super thin one, or one that's super thick, etc. And basically what I did is when I did the superliminal effect, I just keyframed this factor. So when it wasn't supposed to glow, I set it to 0. And then when it was supposed to glow, I just set it to 1 and keyframe, that kind of stuff. So hopefully that makes a bit more sense when it comes to how to make the ring. Again, the key insight here is using CryptoMatte, not Alpha, because Alpha has all this noise in the matte, whereas this has a nice clean one that actually works with depth of field and motion blur as well. And yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about that. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful for the occasional needing to make a ring around your object kind of situation. I just wanted to make it. I thought it'd be useful. And anyways, if you want access to exclusive tutorials and stuff like that, or blend files like this one, Patreon is the place to get that kind of stuff. I want to thank all 560, I think now, some people that are already part of the Patreon. You're making CG Matter and Default Cube possible. Again, for all the people now considering exclusive tutorials, behind the scenes, blend files, early access for some stuff, etc. Check it out if you are interested. And yeah, that's the show. See ya.